Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming to this program tonight. My name is Mohammed Ahmedullah. I work for Stepney Community Trust, and I will just say a little bit about. And actually, I must pass on to the boss first.
Good evening, friends and honorable guests. As you know, Stepney Community Trust is the host organization, and on behalf of the host organization, I've been asked to say a few words in relation to welcoming you and perhaps a little bit about the Stepney Community Trust itself. To do the introduction, it's better if I can introduce myself, as I am one of the 7 trustees who is entrusted with the responsibility of fundraising and managing the charity since 1998. It's been a long time, but we have been in existence since 1982, and we have been supporting disadvantaged communities living in Stepney and working areas of the London Borough of Tower Hamlets. Again, we have been doing so many community-related activities, so many campaigns. In the past, it was mostly in and around education, combating poverty, and of course, promoting racial harmony within the London Borough of Tower Hamlets. More importantly, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome you to this launch of our 4th heritage projects. We have always been involved in community campaign, and as I have said already, combating poverty, fighting injustices, and promoting racial harmony and community integration. We have been long in the community because we're hoping to achieve better integration, better community partnership, and more importantly, doing things that the community itself benefits, and perhaps kind of work with the community and others to promote skills and community cohesion as much as we may possibly can. Without taking much more of your time, what I can say is that I very much hope you would find this evening interesting and enjoyable. Least but not last, I would like to introduce Dr. Ahmedullah, who has been appointed because of his expertise, and as you would know, and as you might know, we have successfully delivered 3 heritage projects already, and this is our 4th one. Over to Dr. Ahmedullah. Thank you.
Thank you. So tonight, basically, I will first tell you more about the project, and then we have some guests. They will share something relevant, from their background, relevant to the project, and then we will invite people to join. As Bodrul said, the Stepney Community Trust, we previously ran 3 projects, and this is one of them. And this is the book was one of the outcome of that particular project. We recreated historical garments, that ladies in this country wore in the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries, but the fabrics came from Bengal, through the East India Company. It was a hugely, successful project, and some of the ladies who participated recreated some of the items. They are actually here, right? Then after that one, we got funding to deliver this project. This project looked at how shipping and technology and innovation in navigation kind of improved or developed during the period of East India Company, which enabled them to increase their power, their capacity, and so on, just to understand how it was possible for a small country like Britain to go all the way and take over so many parts, control and exploit, and bring back a lot of money and goods and so on from Asia. And then this project came out of that, because once you do a project, then you see things and you get new ideas. And this project looked at objects at the Victor and Albert Museum. When we went to the museum for another project, and we were surprised to see literally thousands and thousands of items the East India Company brought, from different parts of Asia, and they stored, in Cloth Workers Center near Olympia. And we were really surprised to see incredible amount of really beautiful stuff and all kind of stuff. So we developed this project where we recruited people from the community, and they had to choose a particular object from the V&A, and then research and write a chapter, and that's how we got this book. What I will do, before I tell you more about this particular project, I'm going to show you a short video of this project, our first heritage project, which will give you some idea, what we have done. And there is a link, between this and this one. You will see when I explain after this short video.
It was fantastic. I was so happy that it was woven by Bangladeshi weavers who are very unrecognized, but they did a fantastic job. And it was a joy to know that I was sewing something that was actually hand woven by Bangladeshi weavers. I'm very interested in Jane Austen, and so I went to Jane Austen's house and we selected an image of a dress that would have been perhaps worn during Jane Austen's time. And so Lewis, my tutor, helped me recreate that dress using Jambani as a design and woven in Bangladesh. So it's a very special garment for me.
When I started researching for a dress to recreate, I kept seeing lots of images of Josephine Bonaparte, who was the wife of Napoleon. This clearly was the it girl of her time that everybody would have referred to find some inspiration on how to look really fashionable. And as it turned out, there's a bust of her in the V&A Museum. So of course I went to see it. The amazing thing about this white marble sculpture is that it is actually really sensual. The curves of her chest, the way her face is framed is really, really beautiful. So this actually was a really good dress for me to recreate because it left a lot of details open, so I could use some design skills. And it looked like there was a lot of interesting techniques used around the neckline, in the sleeves as well. But most of all, I was just really excited to come up with the skirt myself after all of the research that we had done.
The dress which we made is from Museum of London, which was, and it was worn by Lucy. There was our first one, we made it by hand, and while we were making everything by hand, and it was weaved specially from Bangladesh, I came across with, I think it just hit me how hard it was to make a garment at that time by hand and weaving by hand as well. So that actually inspired us to make the second dress motif, which is a black teardrop. So it was just like hard labor, hard work, and now it actually made me appreciate how lucky we are at this time. We don't have to go through all of that procedure. Yeah, we made the motif first, drawn it and colored it as well, and then we've taken it to Bangladesh, and it was done exactly from the motif. It was done exactly how we said. I mean, the second one was a little bit messed up, but it is like a teardrop, and it was weaved specially with the more yarns in 1 inch. And I think that the feel of the fabric is quite different as well. The feel which we can get the fabric in this high street and the feel of this fabric is much softer. And especially making by hand, because it makes a lot of difference. And when I was looking forward to make the second dress by machine, but when I was making it with the machine, second dress, I think it was the yarn was the fabric was so fine. It was even hard to make by machine, so it was easier to make by hand at that time. So that's what I realized it.
Actually making clothes by hand. So I thought that's what made this project stand out and why I wanted to get involved. Because I knew how to sew on a sewing machine, but I certainly didn't know how to sew a dress by hand. I found it quite hard to find the dress I wanted to recreate, mainly because I'm not that interested in historical clothing as such, and I don't like the colour white. I literally don't wear anything white, and so having to look through all these like white pictures of white dresses, I just found it quite boring, and they weren't my kind of thing. So I'd step away from that and look at it from a different perspective. And then I found my dress literally by Googling, which is really interesting because the dress is from 1816, but you can find it on the internet. It's based in Brighton Museum, and what I liked about it was it has lots of different layers, lots of frills, lots of kind of embroidery, and really pretty puffy sleeves. So it's a lovely shape. It turns out to be far more complicated. I thought it looked like quite a simple dress. It turned out to have these layers all had to be done individually. It took so much longer than I thought it would do. The truth is, sewing by hand should have been a much more kind of relaxed, step away, thinking more about sewing. But in the end, I'm pretty sure I took a few shortcuts. We were supposed to be kind of following these historical dressmaking methods, but a year later, still making this one dress, I think I cheated a little bit.
Well, I've sewn a couple of my seams on my skirt, but before I do the whip stitch, I'm just taking the pins out so that I can iron it, and it becomes much more flatter, and I'll get a cleaner line then.
Are you enjoying it?
Oh God, yeah, absolutely. It's been really, really good. Really.
It looks like it's a lot of work, tough.
There is a lot of work, but I don't, when you enjoy something, you don't mind doing it. So.
What could go and see the weave here, the same as in the back. Yeah, see what I mean? The weave is all the same in one place, and it doesn't want to come anywhere else. Yeah.
Silk
if we actually
is a silk
curve in this, There's one version of
balance
this
this out
together
a bit more throughout the rest of it.
together.
So that's what we're going to have to do, I think.
I'll try to have this one. This one,
We're going to have to shape it. This is where we can go about doing it.
this is the column.
Okay.
So basically I saw a dress in the Museum of London which has the particular pattern I was interested in. It was very delicate and 3 leaves coming out of a stem. However, the dress was quite simple and it was pretty much like a dress that is worn in the Jane Austen era by workers and maids. So I wanted something a bit more glamorous and I just trolled the internet and came up with a particular sort of ballroom cum dress type with a trail at the back. So that's what I decided to recreate. The drawings and sort of working out how the pattern was going to be repeated on the fabric and planning out and sending it to Bangladesh was an experience in itself because it was 2 different countries, designers and workshop artists working together, and then it all finally coming together was just mind-blowing in a way because it was teamwork, which was throughout the project has been with everything, and that's been a fantastic experience in itself.
I really enjoyed the sewing and perfecting my technique all through the making of this dress. But for me as a person, what really was enriching is that I have learned so much about the history of the east of London. I moved here only a few years ago and have always been intrigued and knew there was lots of history, I just didn't know what it was. Definitely meeting people from different backgrounds in this project has been an eye-opener on a very personal level to understand the people I'm living with here in the East End.
This was just to give you a flavor of some of the things that we have been doing. This was our first heritage project, and since then there has been like some really brilliant outcomes. In a way, it's catalyst, right? To produce this genius over there. You know? His name is Saiful Islam. You'll find out later on what he has done since then, right? Yeah. Incredible stuff. But what I will do now, I will briefly, talk about the project, and we have some speakers, and then they will speak, and you can ask some questions, and then hopefully we'll get lots of interest in people wanting to join this project. When we invited people to come to this event, and we asked these 4 questions, and we had lots of interest. Basically, why we're doing this project? The largest concentration of Bangladeshi people in this country are from this area, and textile, the rag trade, was the main source of employment. Relatively speaking, small number of people worked in other sectors, but majority of Bangladeshi people worked in the rag trade. When I was in the school, many of my friends, when they left, I used to go to school in Newham. Some of them were Sikh, some of them were white, some of them Gujarati, some of them were Bengali, and so on. Most of the Indians, some of them worked here as well in the rag trade. Some used to work in barking, rubber factory. To go on the docks. There's still jobs around those days. One of my friends, he's from Bangladesh. As soon as he left school at 16, he went to work. It was probably in 1979 in his uncle's factory, in Hackney. So the factory was a source of employment for a majority of the Bangladeshi people. But what the wider society don't know and hasn't been talked about enough is the role of women, who played a big part in this sector. I don't know how many, right? But I reckon thousands, worked from home. Many Gujarati and Punjabi women, they used to come work in factories in town Hamlets as well. Some of them also in Newham worked from home using machine. I have Gujarati friend, I have Sikh friend, they tell me about it, and sometimes when I used to go to their house, I used to see a machine as well, right? I know some Bangladeshi women used to work in factories as well, because I got a job, school holiday job, at a factory owned by a Punjabi Sikh near Petticoat Lane, their showroom downstairs. I was in the press room, I used to cut strings. And next to that room was like a little factory with about maybe 10, 15 machines. And when I went there were young Bangladeshi women working there, in the factory. So there were some, but relatively speaking, this would have been few in numbers compared to the amount they worked from home. So their story and their experience is not really known. And I reckon there are really very interesting and rich experience and stories, that we can bring out by talking to some of the women who worked as machinists from home. My mother worked as machinist from home, right? I will just say a little bit. My mother told me not to say too much, right? When we first came to this country, we lived in Glasgow. So my father bought a machine for my mom, and an Italian lady, she was 29 that time, this is 1973. She used to work in a factory in Finsbury Park. So she used to come to our house to teach my mom, how to sew. And then initially she used to bring, the cut pieces, right? And then she used to take them away, and then my mom used to get, the pay packet, right? And sometimes she used to stay in our house, it's late, spare room, so she used to stay. In 1973, in the summer, her brother and sister came from Italy, teenagers, so we had a spare room, So they always stayed in our house, and they used to cook Italian pastas and things like that, right? Very good. Tomato smell in the house, very strong, and herbs and spices that I wasn't used to, right? So this is just, as a child, this is like one linked experience to do with the rec trade. Bangladeshi women, working from home. There must be so many, interesting stories, that we can enjoy and gain from and learn and also appreciate. A lot of people don't know the economic value, of these women. There must be sort of, you see later on, when the rec trade sort of died, right? And those women can't find any job because they don't have any skills and experience, they don't know English and so on. So people, and also Bangladeshi men became unemployed because the rec trade went out of this area. So people used to sell their scroungers, their own benefits, lots of negative things they should say. But in the 70s and most of the 80s and early 90s, the unemployment was very low in the community because there were plenty of jobs and nearly everybody worked. The other thing is, a lot of the flats here, they were like, this also caused problem. Because I've been talking to some people, it's like the noise at night, because my mum sometimes had to work late into the night, because she's got 4 children, and we're giving her a hard time, and she's got to finish. So when you go to sleep, she drinks strong coffee, and she... So, it's really sort of life and story that we need to know, right? So this is the reason, one of the reasons that we decided, to... And also a lot of the women are very old now and getting on. And we will lose this interesting experience, interesting period, interesting world if we don't record something. Okay, I've said this anyway. So what this project will do, this project is focused on Bangladeshi, but it will also cover non-Bangladeshi. We will interview 18 Bangladeshi women in their 50s and 60s and 70s. Not strictly, but this is just kind of rough guide. Yeah? And we will interview 6 sons and daughters, like someone like me who just told you about this Italian story. So they can tell what life was like, living in a house, mother working, father working, and those days the houses were very damp, paraffin heaters and so on. Lots of, and racism outside, and so there are lots of things. We want to interview 6 non-Bangladeshi women just to compare and just get some ideas about their experience as well. And 6 business people, who supplied work to Bangladeshi women. We actually spoke to some business people. Harold, a Jewish businessman, he was actually going to be here. He's probably in his late 80s. But his wife became a bit unwell, so he's looking after her. But he shared a lot of interesting stories, with us. And as this project develops, we might be able to, invite him to come and talk to us and share. One of the stories he told us is that at one time he wanted to sell his business, he had lots of Bangladeshi workers, and then he thought, why don't they buy his factory? So he got together with them and he helped them purchase his own factory, and he told me that he gave them discount, but probably not. So in addition to interviews, right, of 36 people, we will undertake research on Eastern rag trade, going back just to see how this area, what role this area played in terms of, textile history and so on. And this is one of the reasons why I showed you that video. Now, in the, from around 1660s, when East India Company started to directly import textiles from Bengal, and it steadily increased. By 1725, Bengal became the main source. About 70% of the total imports of East India Company from the whole of Asia came from Bengal. A large amount of textiles came. And Bengal textile produced by men and women, by hand, they would have passed through all these streets here and sold in markets and warehouses. Right? And Bengal East India Company used to also buy a lot of raw silk, from Bengal, right? I don't know what they did. More research needs to be done. What happened to those raw silk? Did Spitalfield silk weaver use Bengal silk or other silk? I don't know. Sorry. So Eastern Rag Trade History, and this project will also look at the Bangladeshi migration into the area, right? And also how the area changed, during the 70s and 80s, the closure of the docks, regeneration, dereliction, population movement, just to give context to the world of these women, We want to recruit. Thank you. But we need your support. We need people to join this project so that they can help us, deliver the project. So what will happen, when we invite you to join, whoever joins, they will be allocated a specific role, right? Specific piece of work, and so they will own it. So it will be like their production. This is what they have generated, right? Each person, so out of the 36 oral history that we'll generate, we want to recruit about 6 participants. Each participant will be responsible for 6. So say 6 sons and daughters, right? 6 business people, 6 non-Bangladeshi women, 6 women in the 50s and 60s and so on. And then, they will write a chapter in a book based on the interview, right? And then, other people who help us with research, the migration history and rag trade history and so on. So they will have their own chapter in the book, right? So there will be a book production where each person will have a chapter in the book. Similar to some of the books that you see there, we have followed the same method, where people join and they help produce the piece, and then it's published under their name. The outcomes of this project right here: a collection of oral history, a printed book, an exhibition, a drama performance. Now Canan will talk to you about drama performance later on, a short video documentary, and then we'll have a tour for about 6 months in different places with the exhibition, and there'll be workshop. The oral history that we generate and the photographs and other materials that we collect will be deposited, at the Bancroft Town and Local History Archives. I'm going to come back to this after, we go through other speakers. Do you have any questions at the moment? No? What I will do now, I will invite, as I said, Harold, the Jewish business person, he cannot make it today, but all the other speakers are here. First of all, I would like to invite Halima Khatun. She is a seamstress, she worked, would you like to come here?
Alhamdulillah, just one question. There's a timeline of about, 2 years or something, which is, I think, the right thing. But what are the major kind of milestones in this? When do you expect the research to finish?
We'll have a recruitment, then we have training, then visits to some of the heritage institutions, and then 6 months, I'll come back to this, yeah? We'll later. Okay. She will speak in Sylheti, and then
I'm going to try and translate as if I can, as much as possible. My Bengali itself, it's quite rusty, but I'll do my best. I'll throw in a few English and Bengali, then please.
আপনি আমার কোশ্চেন করবে বাংলায় আমি
question হলো আপনি aki afna jishme shila sila kila shota afna ki story ekta
জি জি আমি 83 মার্চ থেকে শুরু করছি 83 মার্চ থেকে আমি সেলাই সয়িং লার্ন করা শুরু করছি আমার নেক্সট ডোরও এখন আমার ভাবি ডাকটা হয় তো তার কাছ থেকে আমি শিখছি তাই না আমার শিখেছে
I have to call you Auntie Halima, because that's just how we have to do it. She's been sewing from March 1983. A next door sister taught her to sew and sewing machine.
Yes, sewing machine. Skirt aito ekbar, trouser aito ekbar, hoshom eko design aito. Dress aito ekbar.
Okay, so sometimes the things you sewn were skirts, dresses, trousers. It varied, you know, weekly.
Jina, ekbar ek saptah lagi. Ekta bundle dawa daito, dia daita.
So like weekly articles?
50-60.
Like 50-60?
Yeah, 50-60.
Items?
Items.
Okay. 50-60 items in a week used to come, so that used to be, I guess, different each time.
Yeah, different. Lan korte shomoy ek loge farsina na tin duita tinta ore farsi asta shapta.
Okay, initially when she was learning the ropes, it would be like literally 1 or 2 items, and it took maybe the whole week just to get a grasp of it.
Then the shomoy hiksi tokhon ami 50-60 weekly korsi.
Okay, when she was pro, she was doing 50-60 a week. Yeah. That's really good. That's amazing.
Finishing tarapore dress, skirt, trouser. Ota mar ota kora kodin pore kelogi 1986 তখন আমার নেক্সট ডোর তারা মুভ হয়ে গেছেন কি তারার আসলে তারার আছে ফ্যাক্টরি তো আমি লাইনিং করছি লাইনিং একজনের বারফতে
Another so initially it was a neighbor who owned a factory. They had moved, and obviously then that would leave her without any source of income, so she managed to find somebody else who gave her a job, and then she started to do lining work. Jacket, yeah, inside the jacket, the lining for inside the jacket. আপনার কোনো ফুরুতা সময় ফালরানি সময় না
কষ্ট আছে কষ্ট নাই হচ্ছে সরটা লইয়া ভালছি ছয়টা স্টার করছি যে সময় একজন আসলে 2 বছর আর একজন আসলে 3 মাস
Okay, when she initially started sewing, she had a 2-year-old and a 3-month-old baby, and she said to me earlier she's got 6 children, 4 daughters, 4 sons and 2 daughters.
Yeah. Last son was in the সময় তখন এই সময় আমরা own business করে লাগছি.
Okay, so by the time she had the last son, they had their own business, own factory. Grocery. Own grocery. So yeah.
I saved the money and.
So she saved the money. She was frugal. She worked hard, and
and own business.
She owned her own business. That's really good. That's really.
When I started to the সময় আমি লাইন করছি একটার মাঝে 10 পেনি পাইতাম
একটা আইটেম 10 পেনি
10 পেনি আছে তবুও আমি না better than nothing.
Better than nothing. Okay, yeah. Obviously one item cost 10p at the time, lining work.
তারপরে তো সময় গ্রোসারি করিয়া তখন আমরা ওন আমার বড় ফুয়াইতে সময় দান 10 বছর আর ছোট ফুয়ার 9 না তারা বেশ পিটাপিটি আসলে
কন্টিনিউ করছি
আমি সেলাই কাম কন্টিনিউ করছি 93 থেকে লইয়া 96 পর্যন্ত
Okay. So
83 থেকে লইয়া 86 পর্যন্ত
86 পর্যন্ত so
সেলাই কাম করছি কন্টিনিউ আর 83 থেকে লইয়া 86 পর্যন্ত করছে 86 এর এন্ড গিয়া আমরা অগাস্ট আমরা ওন বিজনেস করে লাইছি.
Okay, so even after opening their groceries shop, she continued to serve for quite a long time, probably a decade, and her eldest son was 10.
10.
Yeah. Okay. So I admire, I mean, I admire, I have a huge respect for the mothers who have, you know, sewn and done all this. So I admire you. I mean, my mum is probably the same age as, was the same age as you. So, yeah.
Do you ask any question? Anybody want to ask any question?
Yeah, anybody want to ask any questions to Halima?
There is one.
Yeah.
I want to ask you whether you were part of the negotiating process in deciding how much you would pay, and whether you felt it was a good relationship with your employer. That's the judgment.
After কোনো জো আসেনি choice আসেনি যে না ফসা ব্যাপারে মাত্রা এমপ্লয়ার বসল লোকে
জি না যে সময় খাটার খাটে দিত খাটা পাইতাম তো ড্রেস একটা ড্রেসও ফার্স্ট ফোন আছে এই স্কার্টও পারলেছি স্কার্টও ফিক্স কোনো ডিসকাস করা না fixed price আছে
okay it was a fix that got an agreement one dress would cost £5 or is it extra dress fast one dress would be £5 it was fixed there was no room for I guess negotiation there and I think she said she got it through the job through a contract sort of it was a neighbor who was on factory and then she would take some sort of job from there and then it would be deducted you know she would get her share for the items that she done yeah
Ladies first.
Go on.
What was the hardest part of doing the time when you were doing this?
বেশি কষ্ট কিটা যেসময় সেলাই করাটা আছে বেশি কষ্ট কিটা আছে আপনার
স্ট্রাগলিং আছে চিলড্রেন লয়া আর 8000 যে সময় আইতো 8000 এর জিব লাগানি হাট আছে
okay it was difficult with children raising a family and trousers were a bit technical yeah
very difficult
with zips
কতবার খুলতাম লাগাইতাম তারপরে পরে বাদে শিখছি
a lot of trial and error you know maybe chucked a few and started all over but yeah so is it someone else?
My mother was exactly in this very similar position like most people's mothers actually I'll say in English did she think that she was going to stay here permanently or did she have plans to return back to Bangladesh?
আপনার সময় এই দেশে আইসুন আপনার নিয়ত আছিল যে অন্য সব সময় থাকবা না কোনো আশা আছিল যে দেশ বিদেশ যাইবা আবার দেশে যাইবা আবার
যে না আমি যে সময় আইছি তখন আমার হরে হইতে যাবে কতদিন হয়েছে দেখি হবে আমার ফ্যামিলি বাংলাদেশে তখন আমি হইতাম তো পাই নাই তো ভাড়া খাই দিব ভাড়া তো খাই দিতে নাই আর ঘরে তো কষ্ট ফাইন্যান্স কষ্ট পাই না তখন আমার ড্রিম আছিল আমরা অন ব্যবসা বিজনেস করবো আমরা অন আসতে হরু তাই অনুগ্রহ হয়েছে অন পড়বা অন এডুকেটেড করবা আমরা যে সময় আমি সয়ং করে সেভ করছি যখন আমরা অন বিজনেস হইব আমরা হরু তাই বাড়া যাইতে নাই আমরা হেল্প করবা সব থাকবা আফটার স্কুল ঠিক ওভাবে আমার হরু তাই বাড়া গেছে স্কুল বাদে তারা স্কুল থেকে আয়া গরু না আয়া তারা দোকানে উঠতা
আপনার লগে থাকতেন Okay. Her when she first came out, she used to live with her in-laws, and her in-laws used to say, you know, go back and visit, you know, go back to Bangladesh and visit. And it was a case of, you know, I can't afford to. I've got a family, you know, I've got children. Tickets cost a lot, and she was just so focused on raising her kids, getting them educated into good jobs, and her aim was to have a business for her own self and I guess thrive, and she's done really well. And I think her dreams obviously it changes when you have kids, I suppose, and you want the best for them.
Business yalle ami urtam 5 o'clock amar bodo fuwa loya 5 o'clock amar husband ami amar bodo fuwa আমরা 5 o'clock urtam utia
she used to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning
200 milk aito milk mine সফর করে দিতে যাইতো 200 milk shop milk mine তো সফর করে দিতে যাইতো
okay আপনার
না milk mine তো যাইতো সফর করে দিতে দোকান করে দিতে তখন আমার ফুয়া আমি আমার হাজবেন্ড আমরা ফার্স্ট মর্নিং উঠিয়া আমরা যাইতাম ওপেন করিয়া আমরা দুধ খাও আমরা দুধ
তো মিল্ক মেনাইয়া দিত
মিল্ক মেনে দিত তারপরে নিউজপেপার ডেলিভারি হইতো
so in the morning what grocery all the backstory what happens behind running a grocery they used to do wake up at 5 o'clock collect 200 bottles of milk newspaper and make sure that was stocked in the shop So they used to do a lot of that, and early morning starts. That's amazing. Yeah.
আমরা ওপেন করতাম 8 o'clock, but আমরা 5 o'clock গিয়ে আমরা সপ্তাহ শেলফ মাল ভরা।
But they used to open at 8 o'clock, but everything was on the shelves by then. Yeah.
আমরা খামার মানুষ রাখা হয়েছে আমরা
Okay.
My question was, what was your day like when you were, say, making 50 items per day, like from the time you were starting and, like, hourly, how would you manage a whole day?
Like a typical day. Yeah. আপনার like দিন শুরু করার তনে খিলা আপনার সময় গেছে আপনি সময় সইন আরম্ভ করছেন?
ফার্স্ট স্ট্রাগলিং করছি খুব বেশি খুলতাম শিখতে সময় যে সময় শিখি এই সময় আমি স্ট্রাগলিং করছি খুব বেশি কষ্ট করছি মানে কষ্ট করছি খুব বেশি ফাইট করছি
একদিনের মাঝে কেকটা সকালে স্টার্ট করতা হোয়াট টাইম হলা
সকালে তো সকালে যে সময় দুইজন লই স্টার্ট করছে তখন স্কুল নাই তো বড়জনের স্কুল নাই তখন আমি সকালে উঠিয়া আমার হাজবেন্ডের ব্রেকফাস্ট দিয়া তাই 6 o'clock ঘর থেকে যাই থাকি 6 o'clock তার ব্রেকফাস্ট দেওয়া বাদে ঘর থেকে গেলা বাদে আর তাই তোর নেক্সট বিলাই খাওয়াইয়া তখন আমি স্টার্ট করতাম স্টার্ট করতাম আর যখন আমি তারার স্কুল হয়ে গেল তখন আরো দুইজন যখন তো তারার স্কুলে আমি নিজে তারার বাপু খামতো সকালে কেমিস্ট্রি খাম করতাম
সকালে যেতা বিকালে
হাফ 6 গরো আইতা আর মর্নিং গো 6 বারাইতা 6 o'clock.
Yeah, so obviously prior to having kids going to school, she'd wake up early, get them sorted, and immediately just start sewing. And when her kids started to go to school, she used to do the school runs pretty much by herself. And her husband worked at a chemist, so he was not around to do the school runs. So yeah, it must have been
right.
And then and she used to also work at night, throughout the night, till hotat. Wow, 3 a.m., 4 a.m.
Morning was it?
How old was she when she started learning to do the stitch?
Sewing, yeah, or hand stitch.
How old was she?
After বয়স কত আছিল আপনার যে সময় সেলাই শিখছেন?
আমি যে সময় শিখছি আমার 16 দিয়ে হয়েছে 18 তে আমার বড় হয়েছে বড় হওয়ার 6 মাসের সময় আমি আইছি আর 93 তে হয়েছে তখন আমার 2 লাখ বড় 18 20.
She got married when she was 16, had her first child when she was 18, 20 she started sewing. Yeah.
One more, yeah, this last one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's sort of a two-pronged question. One is around safety using the machine. So I'm assuming it's sort of an industrial type machine. But what sort of safety was around during that time? But the other element is self-care. She's an awful lot, overwhelmingly amount of work there. How was she sort of taking care of herself during that time?
Okay, industrial sewing machine to বুঝলা তো বেল্ট আছে exposed motor আছে আপনি কিলা এটা মেক শিওর করছেন জানে ফুটো তেনতে সইছেন নেটারে আপনি কিলা আর আপনার নিজের হেলথ রে আপনি কিলা লুক আফটার করছেন আপনি সময় পাইছেন নি জানে একটু রেস্ট করতা
সেফটি আমার নিচে আমরা থাকি উপরে এমটি রুমের মাঝে আমি কাম করি কাম শেষ আমি সুন্দর করিয়া আঠাইয়া লক লাগাই এই রুমে খেয়েও কোনো হরুতা যাইতা না কোনো খেয়েও যাব না খালি খাম লক লাগাইয়া রাখতাম
designated room for the sewing upstairs and she'd keep it locked when it's not in use and আপনি রেস্ট করছেন নি কোনো সময়
Rest time বেশি আছে না children rest
no such thing as rest for her no time
Okay, we'll have to move on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
One businessman told us that some of the places, where they should drop the cut pieces, the machine is to be in the kitchen. So the food smell is to go inside the clothes, the finished products. And that was the problem, it's the issue now. Yeah. Sorry. That's Asma Begum. Her mother, I got a picture.
Yeah. who's that cute baby? I wonder who that is. Yeah, that's my mum. I'm the seamstress's daughter. My name is Asma Begum. I'm sure if my mum was here, she'd say much more, but sadly, my mum passed away just 6 months ago, quite raw. So I'm a bit choked up at the same time, so I'm trying to keep my calm. Again, I just have to thank everyone for coming to the project. It's just one of those things that nobody's ever talked about. The amount of backstory I've observed, and it's just I appreciate that Mahmoud is doing something like this. Anyway, I'll just get straight to it. I'd like to start off with this photograph. It's obviously very sentimental to me. Here is a photograph of my mum, late mum, carrying me as a baby. This photo was taken on a 5th floor flat in Shoreditch in 1982. My mother was 28 years old and I was a mere 3 months old baby, I think. And my siblings at the time were 6, 7 and 8. So I've had a bit of a gap. I was apparently the accident. But yeah, I'd like to think I was the grand finale, but anyway. So she was 28. Technically 4 children under the age of 10. And I would say, if not just look at the photo, just sort of see like what the story is. I mean, it says a picture is worth 1,000 words, and it definitely is. I mean, it captures a moment of a mother's love for her child, looking at me in an endearing way, and then to the left you can see the industrial, clunky sewing machine to the left, which echoes the garment trade that once existed in the Shoreditch area, and reveals the occupation of many first-generation Bangladeshi settlers in Tower Hamlets who worked as machinists and seamstresses. It also conveys the determination of a woman who working on a sewing machine whilst rearing a young family. I think what is at stake, for mum to be working when I was just 3 months old, what is at stake? Like, take it easy, mum, why can't, take it, you don't have to work, do you have to? But it's basically because essentially it was to contribute to the household income. And more so, because during the 1960s and 70s, from my recollections, majority of first-generation settlers were remitting their savings to send to their relatives in Bangladesh too, as well as running their own households. So when I think of the trials that I have running my own family, my worries seem so little and trivial in comparison to what my mother may have experienced. So I'm just a bit shaky because I'm a bit emotional as well, trying to hold it in. Just 2 years after this photograph was taken, my mum would be at the age of 30. My mother fell seriously ill. She had open heart surgery. My father suddenly had to deal with my mother undergoing major operation, and he was left to care for 4 children under the age of 10. I was a toddler at the time. So the hardship they faced was immeasurable. I can't even think, what was going through their head. But it made them stronger as a couple. I saw firsthand my mother sewing dexterously hours after hours to make ends meet and give us the life they felt we deserved. Despite my mother being on lifelong medicine and suffering from her ailments, her resilience and work ethics was just, sky high. To make matters worse, we lived on a top floor story of a brick building with no lift. And my mother's mobility was limited, as the staircase would have been a struggle for her with her heart condition. So I remember I happily used to accompany my dad to collect the garment pieces from the leather factory. It was 1 floor above Avenues Limited. There was a youth centre downstairs. Derek and Caroline used to be youth workers there, and it was just opposite the Brick Lane Bagel. So I remember I used to go there, and as a child I was fascinated, because you would be when you're 8 or 9, you know, I used to think, like, oh my God, look at this room full of sewing machines and plethora of fabric coats, and, you know, the humming of the machines. It was you know, as a child it was you know, interesting to see. While my father carried the heavy articles of clothing, I used to insist to carry the black bag of wadding. So although it looked deceivingly heavy, it was light, you know, but it was probably the size of me. And I remember I used to walk down Quaker Street and then up 10 flights of stairs, and I used to feel all, like, you know, proud with myself. So anyway, I used to take it home, and Mum used to obviously sort through it. I mean, now thinking about when I visited the factory as a child, but now thinking about as an adult, it was very poor conditions. I mean, if you think about it, the machines were back to back. There was the chairs were uncomfortable. There were hardly any windows in the factory, and the air was thick and heavy, because you could just feel it at the back of your throat, like that thread, you know, the room used to get so hot, and not to mention the long hours that they had put in. So Mum, I remember when we used to eventually take the stuff back home, Mum used to lay out a dust sheet on the double. We didn't have, obviously, fortunate to have a separate room, but they had, my mum's bedroom essentially was her workroom as well as her place of rest. So she used to just put a little dust sheet on the bed, and that would be, she would lay the pieces of garment, lining, wadding, and sort of in a production sort of order, and she'd you know, and she'd do the work sat on the machine where it's sort of nearby. I remember she had a bag full of thread and bobbins hanging on the sewing machine, and I used to look at these. I used to go and find those biscuit tins, and to my horror, they want biscuits in there. They were like thread and sewing paraphernalia, and I you know, my mum used to always like tell me to get my hands off there, not touch it. But yeah, again, security. If you think of security, I remember you've got the exposed motor, the belt, for a start, and that was that sort of good height for a child to get their fingers in. I can recall my sister who's there, actually got a finger in the needle. And the bobbin, yeah. So yeah, we've had a few injuries, but you know, we've been okay. But yeah, Mum used to. We just knew when they were in the sewing machine, we just need to sort of stay away. Don't go near the machine. So we kind of, yeah, we knew. I mean, yeah. So again, my mum used to work late into the evenings. She used to have a lamp by the sewing, and sometimes you can attach it onto the machine to early hours of the morning, 2, 3. I remember it was constantly, because we're at the top floor, I suppose noise wasn't that much of a problem. I guess even the neighbours below us were sewing as well. Even adjacent, the whole floor was sewing till probably 2, 3 a.m. in the morning. Again, while my father did more of the arduous work, Mum did more of the finishing work, the lining, labelling, hemming, attaching collars, pockets, and zips. I mean, also, if you think about it, during the 70s and 80s, a free mixing of the genders was generally disapproved of in Bengali culture, and if you add to that the fact that there was racism, there was the far right attacks were rife during the 70s in East London, so in turn it kind of contributed to Bengali women being a bit isolated. Maybe we were thinking, okay, to safeguard them, but that's in a sense sort of restricted the opportunity to learn English and get a job outside of the home. But that's not to say that all Bengali women were restricted or not empowered. I mean, given my mum's circumstances, she used to teach other women in the neighbourhood how to sew. They used to come and they, you know, probably have tea and samosas and, you know, have fun doing this. And my mum used to obviously even she acquired the passion for sewing as well. So she used to sew for leisure. Like she'd make things from dresses to home furnishings. Yeah, she was really good at it. I guess the sewing machine as such, it brought a livelihood. My mum used to say, when she was alive, she used to say, I don't know, I'll say it in Bengali, but she used to say that that machine, I'm a lucky. So it means it's my lucky charm. She goes, that machine brought me so much fortune and good luck. And oh, my hair's on the back of my head, my sort of neck just sort of rise, because that machine kind of like provided the clothes that I wore, the food that I ate, and it has great sentimental value in our family. I mean, I still have that machine in my parents' home, and my mum said, no matter what, do not sell that machine. So it's become a family heirloom, and I promised my mum I will not get rid of it. So I'm deciding to store it at my sister's garage. I got no space in my house. But yeah, and again, like intrinsically, I have a huge respect for seamstresses as well as machinists. My dad was a tailor as well, and also sew as a hobby. And I think the machine in itself is an inanimate object, it's a dormant object, and there's no stories can be told if the seamstress is not talking. So we need these stories to come out, and we really need to get this down and publish it. I think that would be good. Thank you, everyone.
We'll take 3 questions.
Yeah.
One.
Last night my mum was also like a sister, like during this when she passed away as well. And I think it was like a part of her,
Yeah.
her life, her her story, and that's what drove me to come here, because I thought it's someone I want to be part of it.
Yeah.
And I also had memories as a child.
Yeah.
And she likes us taught a lot. My dad was a tailor. He taught her, and she taught a lot of her
All
friends.
of us,
And it was like a social thing they used to get together, and they were teaching each other in our neighborhood. I remember, and it was just something. But I also remember she used to be up until 2, 3 in the morning, sewing, and then wake up the next day.
Yeah.
So I think the earlier questions I wanted to ask him, like about self-care. I sometimes feel like my mom developed a lot of like arthritis and illness later on, and I think some of it was from being overworked and a lot of the stress that came with that. And there was also, the remittance, also the idea that we're going to eventually go back home. So they wanted to sort of like rebuild.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of sort of, just the idea that they would eventually go back. So need to,
Yeah.
the finances. So it was always. So it just, as you were saying that, I was just remembering. And as a child, I remember would help sometimes with,
Yeah, I remember my brothers had the dab hand at doing the buttons. For them it seemed like punishment because it was really hard doing the buttonholing. So we did, my sister, I think we did a lot of ironing. I remember, I was much little, obviously, compared to my siblings were teenagers at the time. So they, they did a fair more pockets. That's my sister, by the way. Yeah. So, yeah, and I remember I was, like, yeah, I know, it was a social thing. Like, if you think about it, probably that was their sort of mechanism to relax, because although doing the articles, that was sort of like, you have to get that done, get those 50 done in a week. Mum on the side would be like sewing my sister and me matching bows and chemises. Do you remember? Like, I have photo proof. So even though me and my sister have a 9-year age gap, we were wearing the same clothes. That was a bit funny. But what I'm saying is that probably that was my mum's mechanism to cope with the stresses of what she was doing, and she enjoyed, doing other things as well as. Yeah, and she used to make for other people and come Eid. Yeah. And even like things like Eid, remember it was a social affair. We would, gather around and wait for our outfits to be sewn and trial it on 100 times and things like that. But yeah.
I was going to say to you, someone asked that question, do the women negotiate the contracts? I recall that it was my dad, because my dad was a tailor, he used to work in a factory, and he used to bring.
He would,
So I don't know how many women actually did negotiate their own contract.
Yeah.
A lot of the times, from my recollection, like in my neighborhood, from all my mum's friends, I know that their husbands would sometimes go. I mean, there were some who did, but generally, from my recollection, I remember it was just mostly the men.
Yeah, the men would do the negotiating. Yeah, because they'd have direct contact with the employer, I suppose. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Do you make your own clothes? Or you buy them?
I do, but I've made a few neckline hems and my mum disapproved because she was like, she's so pro, like, you know how I used to just sort of hand stitch, and she would be like, no, you need to put a piece underneath so it sits firmly on the neck, and I'd be like, I'm not very good at armholes and necks, but I can make cushions and I can make other things, yeah.
You don't make dresses for yourself?
I've made it for my daughter, but not for my. Not. I've made like very easy things like what do you call it? Boleros, things that don't require necks or armholes. But yeah, I've got my way around it. But yeah, my mum had high standards, and you know, she was really good at what she did, and I admired that. And obviously, it was a passion that she cultivated and nurtured, and you know.
What's your profession now? You didn't take dressmaking?
I didn't take dressmaking, but I do a lot of sewing on the side. But I do writing as well. And my dad, he was obviously he was a teacher, and then towards that he was a writer. So I used to write for a lot of Bengali journalism, newspapers, and things like that. So I think maybe I took my dad's side, or maybe I got some creativity from my mum. Yeah.
Can you go to the last question?
Were they on the payroll of that company where they were getting clothes from?
Payroll? No.
Are you asking me?
Payroll? No.
I used to work in factories collecting the seams, and it was all piecework. It was piecework.
Yeah, piecework.
I used to go every Thursday and collect them with my manager, and it was all piecework.
Yeah, so no payroll.
Sultana was saying, it was all the pile, and it was all
piecework.
It was all piecework.
That's probably why they couldn't negotiate a better deal.
Yeah, because it wasn't per hour; it was per item. So you could take weeks doing 50 items, or you could do it within a couple of days. So yeah, it's really difficult, isn't it? It's difficult, especially with around kids and cooking and everything. And yeah. So
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Now the next bit is we will be getting a lot of help, from different institutions to help deliver the project. Can I invite Halima now, please?
It's really hard to follow that up, and it's incredibly touching to hear all these stories. I'm going to come from a slightly different angle, slightly more institutional point of view. As Dr. Ahmadullah said, a lot of these projects are collaborative efforts, and I'm here representing the Tower Hamlets Local History Library and Archives. Has anyone been there by any chance? I'll bring up a picture of the building. Anyone recognise that? Yeah, so we call ourselves a hidden gem, that's exactly why. We are part of the library service of Tower Hamlets. We're part of the network of idea stores. We're a sister organisation. Our collection is a little bit different from the collection out there. Ours is a historic collection. So what we add to projects like this is a very valuable historical context. I'll go into the collections a little bit. I've been very privileged to have seen several of these projects that have come into fruition, and I'm always excited by the sort of projects that Dr. Ahmadullah brings forward and sort of brings to life and breathes life into. So I've seen a few of these projects and super excited to be able to support this project. So a little bit about our collection. We are the principal collections for the history of Tower Hamlets. So we were set up, the building's been there since about 1902, and since 1965 we've been the home of the local history collection, which comprises of sort of everything from maps, images, oral histories, illustrations, newspapers, from sort of 1600s through to the modern day, and we continue to collect that. That's really how we come into this story. So if you want to see a breakdown of what the collections is, I recommend you grab one of these flyers. And we're open to the public, so we're very lucky that in Tower Hamlets we have a resource that we could go to if we have questions about our local history, if we have research inquiries, and that we could go and research independently. As you know, libraries are being sort of assaulted all across the country, and things are being shut down, and local history resources are at the cracks of that. So we're very lucky we have a resource in the borough that we're able to do that. And we are open to a public Tuesday through to Thursdays and take public inquiries. So anyone, so many people here have been adding sort of to Asma's story and Halima Auntie's story, and saying they had their parents who did this, and they had their family who worked in the X factory, and these are the sorts of stories you could add a bit more context to if you don't have the photos, if you're not lucky enough to have the addresses, if you're not lucky enough to have that documented. If you still have some questions to answer, really, our business is sort of family history inquiries, and that's what we support people in doing. So the collections, just to break it up a little bit, we have sort of library, which is published material. So if you're looking for, I don't know, adverts in the East London Advertiser about 150 years ago, we would have that on record and you could look that up. Archives are more personal papers. So the oral history collection that Dr. Ahmadullah will work through in this project will effectively sit in the archive collections, which is a very, very special material that you wouldn't see anywhere else and only lives in our collection. We do have a small museum collection. I think when we started chatting about this project, you talked about collecting potentially some sewing machines as well. Yeah? Okay, so some of you might have to part with some of your sewing machines. I would love to add it to the collection. Like you said, I think the stories today have been really honing in on the fact that this heritage is effectively at risk. It's disappearing, the stories are disappearing, with family members passing away, and with this history sort of not being people not talking about it as much or talking about it enough, and that is precisely why preservation of this history and these projects are so important. So that goes into the collections a little bit more, and that's sort of a picture of our reading room about 100 years ago, and that's us now. So that's the research room. Looks like an intimidating space, which is why I come out to sessions like this and say we're not that scary. So part of my work as Heritage Officer for Learning and Participation is to support a lot of sort of education engagement type work with the local history library. So I do sort of school sessions, workshops, outreach, community groups come to us, ESOL groups and so on. And that's the sort of work we do. And we do all sorts of collaborations with organisations like Stepney Community Trust for the arts and so on to put on projects like this. This is actually part of our last major project called the Women's Hall, which was looking at the history of the East London Federation of Suffragettes. Last year was 100 years since women won the right to vote. East London had an incredibly fascinating, Hamlets especially had an incredibly fascinating history about their role within that, about the working class women's struggle in fighting for the vote, about how before you have the vote you needed food and you needed a roof over your head. So the struggle here had a very different element to it. This was our collaboration with a Somali women's arts organisation called Numbi Arts, who put together several sort of archive workshops and collection workshops. This was a session where we invited sort of local Somali families to bring together archive material that was of importance to them, relevance to them, and talk about it. Almost like what we've been doing today, but we've been using sort of Halima Auntie's sort of recollection as the starting point to discuss this sort of history. So the collections itself, this is what adds the context. And we've been talking a little bit about rag trade and tailoring, and the Bangladeshi community and the Jewish community. All of these things we know we know these communities were in existence. We know these histories happened, but obviously there's still some huge gaps in the stories. And Asma's story here is one of the fullest recollections I've ever seen of this history, and that's why it's so important to record her. We should have had a recorder right there. What we have are good. Okay, good. So what we have are images, but like Asma was saying, images or objects don't speak for themselves. We have, very small captions, a date, a smattering of information, and the rest of it, us as sort of historians effectively have to work out the rest of the picture, which is why oral history is one of the most valuable historical records, in my opinion, that you can have. But what we do have is some visual records of what happened here, the development of the rag trade from the Huguenots, so Spitalfields weavers at work in 1895, through to sort of Jewish tailors. There's no date in this, but you can see all of them men, all of them in the factory, no women yet, so we're talking about women today, but there's still no sort of reflection of that in the collection yet. And then going to Bengali men tailors, that looks like he's working at home. So, but we have a visual reference of Bengali men working in factories as well. That's very much what my dad used to do. My mum did take some work out home, but she was quite unwell, so we don't have that history in our own family. But this resonates with me quite a lot. And then this is a picture of a Bangladeshi woman in a factory. Again, still not that story of Bangladeshi women at home. That's quite special, and this is why we are supporting a project like this. So that brings us to sort of what we're going to do. As part of our collaboration with Stepney Community Trust, as part of this project, we provide that context through the collections. We'll be supporting through research visits. So the participants who sign up to this project will come to us. We'll give them a sense of sort of what's in the collections, but actually it's really up to you to research your own history, your own interest, all these sorts of things that you've sort of obviously followed through in your head, but or stopped at a question and then not sure where to go with it. That's the bit where we could help with. And then of course the final oral histories, once they're recorded, will will live with us effectively, and we'll make that accessible to the public to come and listen to, and hopefully learn about this important hidden history or otherwise forgotten history, and do more research and generate more interest in it. Are there any questions?
I think we'll skip that.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Can I invite Maureen from London Metropolitan Archives, please?
Okay, good evening everyone. I'm really jealous that this oral history isn't going to be at London Metropolitan Archives, but there is good reason for that, because we have a London-wide remit, and so if the project was looking at machinists throughout the whole of London, then it would be suitable, but as it's very specific and very local, it goes to a local archive. Before I start talking through the PowerPoint, I just wanted to highlight a couple of things, flyers which I've brought along, and I've left them on that table there. It's about some of the events, and in May we have a special festival, May Spring Festival, and I think that there are some events which are relevant to what you will be doing with this project, and which some of you might, if you're going to volunteer to work on this project, might be interested in. And one of the workshops is how to tell your story, and basically it's going to be run by a woman who has done writing for Coronation Street and for other theatre, but it's looking at, a story of a person, individual, a community, and then how you translate that into something that's more commercial. And she's won a lot of awards, so I think she does that well. She's just in fact come back from Canan. So that's my plug for that. There's also, if you're interested in some of the background history, like the Huguenots, there is a workshop about the Huguenots and the fact that they were master silk weavers, so if you want to look at that aspect. And there's about presenting, and in this case again it's Huguenot family history, but also we have creative writing workshops and looking at that from a historical context. So do pick those up and have a look. So London Metropolitan Archives. We are the largest publicly funded local authority. We are the City of London Corporation, that's our borough if you like, and we have over 100 kilometres of records and at least 20,000 written inquiries a year. We cover, as I said, the whole of London, so the area within that red border. We collect archive material, so our remit is to tell the story of London, all the people who've lived, worked, gone to school, whatever it is that people have done in London. We aim to collect that and to tell that story. And so our records come from public organisations, courts, hospitals, churches, etc. religious institutions and private institutions. Our records date from 1067, so just after 1066, right? And the Battle of Hastings, and our acquisitions, our modern day acquisitions, are coming especially from different communities. So the Muslim Women's Helpline collection came to us, and acquisitions come in many different ways. So it can be one bag full of material, it can be boxes and boxes and boxes of material that's been kept in someone's garage, shed, cupboard, under their beds. We collect it all, we're not worried about where it comes from. And then different agreements, that's the third picture, different agreements are signed according to what those collections might be. So we're working with this project because we're going to give our expertise on issues like acquisition, what to collect, how to collect it. We're all about paper, we don't collect objects at all really, although we have a few that have come in with certain collections. And we will work with you to show how to catalogue the material that you will bring in. Because the oral histories are great, but what happens when you start talking to someone, they'll say, oh, I've got this picture and I've got this, and I've got this item, and it's a bit of a skill in terms of knowing exactly what to accept, what to take, what to keep, and then what to do with it, and how to process it. And that's the cataloguing side of things. We have probably the biggest conservation studio in the country, and our conservators have skills in everything from bookbinding to the actual repairing of damaged items through using the Japanese paper that is used to do that. And so a part of the element of this project will be passing on some of that conservation skill and learning and seeing what our conservators do also. So as that might, because some of the items that are collected from the oral histories might need conservation as well. Okay, so generally we give access, these are the people who use our collections most often, and the bit of parchment actually is what it is. I don't know if you're going to be doing that much research at LMA. I think you'll do some.
Yeah, definitely some.
Because we certainly will have photographs of the area from the 60s, 70s, and so on. But our collections go, like I said, from 1067 and William the Conqueror and the Norman invasion, and we have things like this record, which Sir Francis Drake, which I know that everyone will have heard of, Sir Francis Drake, and it's a young boy who was taken from Guyana, who is baptised in England. So real variety, and you never know exactly what there is in the collection and what you might find, and that's a lot of the joy of the researching. So just pictures of inside LMA, one of our iconic items, the Magna Carta, 1297. There are several Magna Cartas that still survive, and we have two of them, two of the better ones. We have a Mediatek area, and the Mediatek area is where you can access oral histories and film footage, and we have thousands of short film footage of London. So that's going to be another area that you'll be able to research and get information from. And material that we have, as I said, comes from many different communities. So, and the format of archives as well. So we work in terms of if you are given, whilst you're doing an oral history, something which is in a strange format, it might be film that was taken, photographs from the 70s which will be fading and ghosting and all going brown, and which have to be conserved and preserved. We're happy to work and help and advise about that. And then, of course, the newest type of format is the capturing of emails and those types of records. I was going to go quickly through, but I know it's a long evening, and some of the projects that we have done, apart from the ones with yourself, is the Black and Asian Londoners project, and the Moving Here project also, for which did Caribbean, Jewish, Irish and South Asian communities, and is still accessible to look at, although the website itself is, you can't add to it. For a long time you were able to add a lot of information. Huntley Archives, I'm going to go really quickly through some of this. Some of what we've done with groups, we've had launches at the archive, and we've had conferences and seminars and so on as well. And that's just really giving you an idea of one of our collections, the Eric and Jessica Huntley collection at London Metropolitan Archives, and it's an example of how we've worked with a community to collect their items. And from that collection came all of these. So that often happens as well. Once you start collecting in one area, other people say, well, actually, there's this project that needs to be done, or there's this person who has a collection that might be relevant to the Machinists project. So hopefully that will happen with this project as well. And similarly, we've worked with Chinese community, and that's very recent, from about 2007 or thereabouts, beginning to get collections from those communities. That's it.
Thank you. We don't take any questions. Before I invite the last speaker, just want to say something. Maureen mentioned about Francis Drake. You know, he was the first Englishman to go around the world, circumnavigate. In 1579, he arrived in Ternate, small Clove Island, you know, after taking a lot of gold from Spanish settlement on the other side. And he couldn't take any spice from there because it was already too heavy. Can I invite Jana?
Hello everyone. I'm Dr. Salih. I have done a couple of projects with Alhamdulillah on heritage projects, and some of my performers, because I make theatre, so some of my performers are here as well. When Ahmadullah Bey asked me, talk to me about, being part of this project, I was hooked from the start for several reasons, because this project is very close to my heart. As a London-born Turkish Cypriot, and I'll kind of abbreviate that to LTC, we grew up in the rag trade. My family, most of my immediate family, but also my aunts and uncles, etc., we had factories. They worked at home. My parents worked at home, and they had factories. My mum wasn't very good. My mum was a businesswoman, is a businesswoman. Well, she's retired now, but So my mum would prefer opening factories, getting workers in. My dad was old school. He could do anything. You know, like the electricity, the carpentry. My dad would, what's the word? He was a cutter. But he also knew how to work all the machines. I know how to sew, to overlock, to felling, to buttonhole and, you know, put buttons and everything. Because we learned, because it was a family business, and there were times when it was like 1 in the morning and we had to get a docket out, so everyone was all hands on deck, cutting those strings. I used to hate cutting those bloody strings, and putting the, what are they called? The plastic over the garments, getting them all ready. So the next morning, yeah. And then my parents would take us out for a meal. That was our payment. Family have also, you know, I've still got my mum's sewing machine. And it's really interesting that you said about what your mum said, because I spoke to my mum a couple of weeks, I'm going to speak to my mum every day, but a couple of weeks ago, and I said, Mum, I'm going to sell this machine, yeah? And she said, don't you dare. She said to me, no, if you're going to send it over to Cyprus. She goes, and I can, you know, sew there. And I'm like, Mum, it's an old machine. She's going, no, it doesn't matter. They're so, those machines were so embedded, not just in the economic attainment for our families, but in our culture as well. And the London Turkish Cypriot culture in particular for me. And the rag trade actually has I discussed the rag trade in my PhD thesis that I completed in 2014, and I'd like to read an extract of that thesis to you to try, you know, to get you to understand how much research I put into it. And a lot of my research was oral history. I interviewed, well, not so much, not formally interviewed. I had lots of discussions with different first-generation Turkish Cypriots that had moved here, and predominantly they were all in the East End, because this is where, you know, the rag trade dominated. I'll read that in a bit. Another thing that my family, like most diasporas, came here to, like I said, get economic attainment so that they can go back home. And then they have their kids, and their kids grow up here. And so the kids are their home, so it ties them to this country. So they come and go. And my parents would send money home to my grandparents, to most of my mum's family. It's another issue. But so what was interesting was that they reimagined what home is here. And I'll go into that when I read you my thesis as well. We learnt the trade, and what's interesting about the rag trade for us was because we also had factories, and my mum said to me, I've always wanted to do a project called a theatre piece called The Rag Trade, predominantly set in, the set being a factory, where you've got the machinists, you've got the pressing, you've got the overlockers, you've got the massive desk with the cutters and everything, and all the things that go on there, because my aunts and my uncles met their partners at the factories, my mum and my dad met in the factory. It was, people met, had affairs. This is what I don't know, this is what I've been told. And it was, and there was a lot of, everybody had similar experiences, and it's really interesting hearing you talk about, the history of the Bangladeshi community, because it's more or less like you're talking about my community, and the diaspora's experiences are very much alike in this, particularly in the East End of London, and that's another reason why this project is quite close to my heart, because it's something that I'm familiar with. Let me just read you very quickly what I wrote. A large majority of first-generation LTCs, London Turkish Cypriots, worked in the rag trade, and often interactions in the factories led to marriages, affairs, friendships, and at times conflict. The rag trade was also a key source of income for most Turkish Cypriot migrants. The lack of education and knowledge of the English language for many Turkish Cypriot migrants meant that the rag trade was a place that offered opportunities that were not limited to the advancement of financial prospects, but the development of a social network as well.
This is a customer announcement. I did the Whitechapel Begum in half an hour's time at 9 o'clock. Should I be on the third floor?
Am I the last one? Okay, that's right. Let people out. First, when we came to this country, this is a quote from one of the people that I interviewed. First, when we came to this country, in factories there were only Cypriots. That is to say, we didn't have any difficulty because we didn't know English. So there is a strong implication that the rag trade was a space in which the Turkish Cypriots reimagined a community in which they belonged. In other words, in this alternative community, they interacted with other Cypriots, both Greek and Turkish, spoke their own language, and preserved personal and communal understanding of what the Turkish Cypriot nationality advocated. Okay, I'm going to skip that bit. It could be argued that the rag trade formed a kind of symbolic community for the LTC as proposed by Cohen. The community as experienced by its members does not consist in social structure or in the doing of social behaviour. It inheres rather in the thinking about it. It is in this sense that we can speak of the community as a symbolic rather than a structural construct. So what I gathered from this research was that my mum said to me the factories were like little Cyprus. Everybody knew each other, Greek, Turkish. A lot of the owners were Jews as well, so they knew that community as well. And it was... Okay, let me just go back to this. Applying this theory to the LTC of the rag trade community implies a relational space constructed through symbolic meanings. Meanings that are construed by its members and determine the boundaries and codes of behaviour that evoke a sense of the familiar, which in turn induces a sense of belonging. The environment within the rag trade factories, however, was for many LTCs not only a workplace and a means of economic attainment, but also a social space within which they may continue to practice transported etiquettes, languages and social customs replicated from their homeland, both with other LTCs as well as other diasporas. For the first generation LTCs, the factory spaces of the rag trade did not so much create a symbolic community, but supported an idealised and somewhat replicated one of the homeland. So it was like they were preserving the homeland that they had come from with their own community. Now, one of the things, there's loads more that I can read, but I'm sure we're short on time. One of the things that I think the rag trade... I've always wanted... Okay. The rag trade features in my PhD as a key factor in reiterating the London Turkish Cypriot community's sense of identity and the binary act of integration against ghettoisation. So you're looking at... It's a social construct, but at the same time, when family and friends were working from home, they were isolated. It worked for them. It was good. You had your family, but you were earning money. But at the same time, you were isolated from integrating with other communities to the point where a lot of my communities became ghettoised. They didn't learn the language. I interviewed people who have been here for 40, 50 years and they still don't know English very well because it was safer and they had the more sense of belonging, being within their own community. So that's another area that we'd have to look into. It's not all nostalgic. Some of it is, they didn't do themselves any favours. I've always wanted to produce a play even that brings to life these people's lives, like productions of the past that touch on other workforces in London. In particular, I'm interested in the stories of those folks who created communities and social structures through their interactions in the rag trade. I've done that. Although this project will focus mainly on the Bengali women machinists in the rag trade, there will be room for other communities, like the Jewish and Cypriot communities that helped form the community of the rag trade. The play will take stories of the various people we will interview and form a production that will look at the humour, the tragedies, and the development of this community over a period of time that the rag trade dominated economic attainment for many minorities, especially in the East End of London. So it's going to be a really exciting project, and it's going to be a really exciting play that we're going to produce. So watch this space. That's all I'll say.
Just before I let you go, Canan is the theatre director. She has produced many plays, really interesting. So she will work with us and help us produce a play based on some of the stories that we will generate. What I'd like to ask, I'm not going to go back to my slide. What I will say is that we hope to, produce a really high quality, how do you say, outcome or whatever, right? Yeah? That will come out of the project. And we really invite everybody, young, old, any race, any color, whatever, right? Yeah? To join. How you can join, an application form will be uploaded on our website end of this week, or you can write to us by email. Our email is here, and request an information pack with application, which I will be able to send you probably Sunday or Monday. And the application deadline is, I think, 13th of May, but it will be in the email, right? So please take an interest and help us deliver something really incredible and wonderful. Thank you. By the way, take the books are free. Yeah, you can take the book.